What's up, everybody? David Parsons here. Welcome to News Trap. We are going to take a ride through the headlines together. This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Honestly, I've been a freak about the news since I was a little kid, waking up before everyone else to run out onto the driveway like Tony Soprano and grab the paper and start freaking out about whatever was happening. And then really looking forward to everyone else getting up so I could spill to them all the things that were going on in the world that I thought were important. I found a real partner in life with that impulse with Justin Rogers Cooper. Justin is someone who obviously is a kind of co-host of Nostalgia Trap. We do a live stream every Friday where we sort of freak out about the news and talk about things in the context of pop culture and history. And you can check that out. We have a long history of doing that together. But we have an even longer history of trading screenshots from news stories and other things we find online or wherever every day. I mean, I wake up every morning, literally, for years, to a series of screenshots, many of them from the Financial Times, from Justin, and little sort of like little commentary, little takes. All of that stuff, and I send him a lot of stuff too. We kind of like trade back and forth. I think I tend to send a lot of like things about culture, things about tech. We freak out about the same things and sort of different things too. Justin is obviously very heavy on political economy, and that's probably why we get so many Financial Times freakouts. But anyway, those screenshots and that sort of conversation on text and on email for so many years has become, a really important way for me to understand the world, honestly. And it's like having my own little private curated news service. And I would be lying if I said it didn't have an impact on the kind of conversations we follow on Nostalgia Trap and the type of the things we talk about on the show. So, I thought it would be nice to let everybody else in on that private curated news freakout by just starting out a little weekly series I'm calling News Trap, where I can share some of the screenshots, many from Financial Times and many from other news services too, that stuck out to us this week, and let you in on the world of Justin and David and the others that contribute to this show. Sort of how we're framing and thinking about what is happening and what might be coming, because we're also futurists too. So none of this is meant to be like this is what's happening. I didn't want to really create a like deep journalistic sort of institution here. What I want instead is to sort of continue the conversations and ideas that come up on Nostalgia Trap and sort of check in with them each week. So let's get started. Here's one that I sent to Justin this week. I sent this one, and I think it's a nice way to get it started because it sort of seems like the sponsor for the show. I got an email. It wasn't an email. It was actually a private message on LinkedIn. If you are on LinkedIn, and I am because I need a job, I need to be in the world where people can maybe support me because I'm sort of, this weird outcast academic space. Anyway, LinkedIn is sort of, you got to be there if you want to sort of be in the world of professional people. It's horrible, though. It's easily like the worst social media. Like the most demonic and weirdest social media platform there is LinkedIn. If you don't know what it is, it's like a combination of like job searching, but also like social media. There's like an influencer social element to it where you make friends, but they're really just like professional colleagues, sometimes bots, etc. It's a sick world. And it kind of, it sort of is the merging of the world of influencing and the awful sort of humiliations we have to go through to enter something called the job market. But either way, I got this message from a dude that looks terrifying in his thumbnail, his profile picture. His name is Grizz Ali, and he identifies himself as a capitalist/liberty lover. So this is going to be good. So what does Grizz have to say to me? He says, "Hi, David. I hope you're well. This is Grizz. I'm the co-founder of Helix MWR. Helix MWR is an invite-only mobile hormone therapy company, which includes our testosterone and HGH therapy. We would like to offer you our executive promo membership for $285 monthly. Normally, memberships are $385 monthly. In addition, any friend you refer will also be welcome, blah, blah, blah. He's selling his thing. So this is for executives. And what is it? It's hormone therapy for executives. Here's where you get to the nitty-gritty of what this is. Grizz Ali tells me, quote, "Our program is popular with executives because we balance all main hormones, including testosterone, HGH, thyroid, and cortisol. The benefits should give you greater energy, stronger sexual function, more fat loss, boosted focus, and better mood, all factors that will contribute to more efficient work as an executive." So we didn't really need to comment much on that one when I sent that to Justin because, what is there to say? It's all kind of there. There's some like American Psycho shit going on there, but the idea of like capitalist, liberty-loving, psychotic entrepreneur dudes being like, you need to do hormone therapy. At the same time, there's like this trans freakout about that being the most disgusting and amoral thing ever, is like injecting hormones into your body or trying to sort of hack your gender genetically or biologically. That's what these fucking dudes are doing. And so Grizz Ali, this was a weird email or message to get, but it doesn't surprise me, I guess. I mean, it falls into the whole Joe Rogan shit, right? That Joe Rogan's sitting there sort of at the center of a reactionary anti-trans movement. I would put Joe Rogan at the center of that. And fuck you, Joe Rogan, for being that. But I mean, at the same time, the absurdity of it is that Joe Rogan is calling people out for like fucking with their gender with drugs. And the dude is just like a walking fucking steroid pharmacy, right? Like the guy like has done nothing but gender modification and gender enhancement his whole fucking career. That's like what he represents, is like make yourself a man, right? So Grizz Ali, it falls into all that shit. And LinkedIn has a lot of that stuff. I think people in the future, maybe even now, will maybe link Joe Rogan and that sort of that culture that is kind of this is how you hack capitalism kind of thing, and the gender element is really interesting to me. So I sent that to Justin. Let's see, what else did we look at this week? Justin sent me, of course, a lot of Financial Times headlines and excerpts. So let's get to those. There's some really the Financial Times stuff that Justin sends me. These little flashes of just maybe a couple sentences from a larger piece where we locate maybe the heart of what the article is really about. These, to me, these are like the structure of my reality in some way. I'm like, these are the things that I take as just a fact, as sort of the tent poles of propping up whatever system we've got and where we might be headed in it. So here's a great one from April 9th, 2023. The headline is, "Civil Unrest Overtakes Terrorism in Insurance Claims." Now, what this is about let me just read the excerpt. Civil unrest has caused more than $10 billion of insurance and reinsurance losses across the globe since 2015, compared with less than $1 billion from terrorist attacks, spooking underwriters and fueling a surge in the cost of cover. The figures are included in a report from insurance broker Howden that explores how rising discontent, driven by the increasing cost of living and other social pressures, and stoked by social media, has driven up the frequency and size of claims on strikes, riots, and civil commotion insurance. This typically covers property owners against damage in such episodes. The report highlights demonstrations in Chile in 2019, which led to episodes of violence and looting that damaged supermarkets, pharmacies, and transport infrastructure, the Black Lives Matter protests in the United States the following year, with unrest in several cities featuring some vandalism and looting and insurance payouts across 20 states, and another hit for insurers from South Africa's 2021 unrest. The prevalence of civil unrest-related payouts marks a turnaround from the 1990s and early 2000s, when terrorism dominated the wider insurance market covering political violence. Terrorists have since turned their focus to targeting civilians in attacks that have left much less insurance damage. So that excerpt is fucked up for like a million different reasons. I mean, first of all, it sounds like children of men, right? Like we're sitting here being like, well, civil unrest in countries around the world has led to an increase in insurance claims. Like, it's just sort of like this thing you hear, like, what the fuck? Civil unrest. Why? Because of the cost of living, right? Like, that quote is insane. It's driven up, why are these happening? The increasing cost of living and other social pressures, and stoked by social media. So, like, all of that idea of, like, we're going down the toilet, and then we've got this sort of, like, other consciousness that is sort of playing with that and fueling the fire of it. And then, you know, the other part of it that freaked me out, too, is that, well, you know, it's just mentioned in passing that, well, terrorists are sort of, they're done with the era of, like, big spectacular attacks on buildings and infrastructure. They can just do, like, mass shootings every once in a while. It reminds me of, what is it? I think it's Hypernormalization, the Adam Curtis documentary from a few years ago, where he did a long extended bit about that and the people that came after Osama bin Laden in terms of envisioning the purpose of terrorism, and went beyond, you know, spectacular attacks on the World Trade Center and towards sort of this low level, you know, make it basically ruin society so that, like, you're always fearing some sort of public violence. I mean, that is happening in the United States, I think, with gun violence, is the sense that every public place has been spoiled in some way because we're always imagining that possibility. That's not one terrorist doing it. That's instead this sort of virus, and that's really scary shit. So this civil unrest article, that's one that caught our attention this week. Here's another one. This is also from April 9th, 2023, Financial Times. The headline is, "Sidelined Greens Lose Faith in the German Coalition." This article is about the Green Party struggling to retain power and get its legislation passed in Germany. But it's got some really, really fucking hard shit for us on the left, and thinking about, like, climate change and how to actually do anything about this, particularly with the state. And with people already embedded in a lifestyle, particularly like middle class and elite people. So let's listen to what's going on in Germany. The Greens' partners said the Eco Party was itself to blame, accusing it of losing touch with reality. An example often cited is the plan initiated by Robert Habeck, the Green Economy Minister, to phase out oil and gas in the heating of homes. A new bill dictates that from next year, every newly installed heating system must be 65% powered by renewables, but the bill triggered panic when some details were revealed last month, with homeowners fearing they would be forced to rip out their boilers and replace them with expensive heat pumps. The debate has hit the Greens' popularity. The party was polling as high as 25% last autumn. Now it's on around 16%. Obviously, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, when you have to take measures that make demands of people, you suffer in the polls, said the Green minister. People close to Scholz said the Greens underestimated the German strength of feeling on the subject. The trouble with the Greens is that they're a rich people's party, said one official. Their voters can afford to exchange their heating systems, but others can't. The SPD, which is the German Social Democratic Party, has, after all, always seen itself as the protector of Germany's workers, and party leaders say that, if necessary, it will also protect them from green policies that impose excessive costs on ordinary people. You can't just tell people that from now on they have to ride bikes or take trains like in the center of Berlin, said the SPD's Huberts. A lot of people in Germany live in rural areas and commute to work. That's the reality of this country. So that one definitely caught our attention. And me and Justin were sort of talking about the idea that the environmentalism and the kind of like switch over to green capitalism or whatever that might be is something that's going to cost a lot of fucking money. And when you put that costs on, we put those costs on people who are already fucked over, it's not going to work, And to me, like, I see that in California so much. A lot of the backlash in California against Gavin Newsom or whatever the like Democrat in charge is around like the rising costs and regulations around green energy. Big fights going on in California right now about new regulations around heating systems. And it's like, yeah, if I'm a guy that's like renting a house, if those costs come to me and I'm told I got to now spend $500 more a month in order to save the planet, fuck off, right? And like that asking that sacrifice of working people, to me, creates an intense politics where it's like, we got to change capitalism and move beyond what we're doing so that we can ameliorate the worst elements of climate change that are coming. And also, you're going to fucking pay for it when you already are against the wall. That politics is intense. And like to have like the left-wing Social Democratic Party in Germany say to the Greens, like, fuck you, you're rich people. You can spend money on your boilers, but we can't. That's the fight. That's a fight of the future. And that's a significant rift and contradiction in whatever we call green politics. And speaking of that, got one last Financial Times headline for you that I think captures a little bit of why this is so scary and why this is the map of the future. This is from April 3rd, 2023. The headline is How China is Winning the Race for Africa's Lithium. And here's the relevant excerpt. More than lithium is at stake. From Brussels to London to Washington, concern over access to critical minerals is at an all-time high after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and amid escalating tensions between the West and China. The People's Republic has built a dominant position in many of the minerals that are crucial for the energy transition, including cobalt, lithium, and rare earth metals. The West is preparing to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to try to catch up. Lithium is abundant across the earth, meaning there should be enough to go around if money is pumped into the right projects. The challenge is timing. The rapid uptake of electric vehicles is expected to drive a near 5-fold increase in lithium demand by 2030. So I am hearing the Nirvana song Lithium in my head, obviously. But also I'm thinking about the transition to electric vehicles, greening the earth, moving off of fossil fuels, dropping our carbon emissions. All those goals require new technologies, new minerals, new sorts of sources of energy, and that's taking place within a geopolitical situation that's heading towards, honestly, world war over that new reality. So world war for green capitalism, what I think I mentioned, like whose sons and daughters will die in the lithium wars. It's intense. And it's important to understand, I think, that, in the context of all these headlines about authoritarianism and fascism and humanitarian ideas around invasion of Ukraine and all that kind of stuff, the real power play here is also how the fuck are all of these countries going to deliver for their people and their big promises. And in order to do that, I mean, we're going to fight over lithium in Africa. We're going to fight China over lithium in Africa so that we can make batteries and green the world. That's not quite the, environmental, hippie, Ewok kind of revolution I often had in mind when I thought about sort of the transition from capitalism to something else. But the reality is, it's all capitalism, right? And the different phases of this are what we're seeing. And I think that we're living through a particularly intense one, in part because we are coming to the end of a certain kind of technological era, or at least we're kicking and screaming against it. So those are some of the Financial Times headlines. We'll have more headlines for you next week. I want to share a few other things with you before we go. I have to say, the comment board on the Nostalgia Trap Patreon page, the comments on our podcasts and live streams are a place that I really look forward to reading. Increasingly, I don't know, long form stories. I feel like people, you guys that listen to this show, some of what we talk about stimulates you to write stories about your lives. And that's, that goes to, I guess, our interest in memoir and biography. But our last two live streams, our last two episodes with Justin, where we talked about Billie Holiday, her memoir, Lady Sings the Blues. And then we talked about Tracy Chapman's song Fast Car and did a whole episode just about one song, which I actually really love doing. I love talking about a song for an hour and really getting into what the fuck a song really is, because it's like a, 3-minute drug experience. And I don't know, you got to catalog that. You got to figure out what that does to you. It's important. But I wanted to highlight one of those patron comments, the patron comment of the week, because this one was about Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, and I thought it really captured something about sort of the what we're trying to map out on Nostalgia Trap and what we're trying to locate about people's lived experiences and how that intersects with whatever we think about political division in this country. So this is a patron named Deranged Hermit. I love that name. I think Deranged Hermit probably describes me in some way and describes maybe our target audience on Nostalgia Trap. But Deranged Hermit says the following. Hi guys, my family and I just got back from a vacation to the Gulf Coast with a couple of other families. This song was played multiple times, so many that I couldn't believe that you dropped the discussion of it right into my lap the day we came home. We had an 80s themed cookout one night where this was on the playlist. But in addition, there's a recent released cover of this song by the country artist Luke Combs that I, via a couple country fans in the house with us. I thought it was so interesting that this song was covered by someone from the Nashville country music establishment, given its radical themes and original composer. At one point, I got into a political discussion that was amicable with right-leaning men on the trip with me. I definitely got the feeling that the animating principle behind their politics was fear of loss more than fear of the other. I did not detect animus from them toward racial, sexual, or gender minorities. They seemed to truly believe that the issues facing these communities would be removed if they more fully embraced capitalism and meritocracy rather than looking for centralized solutions, universal health care, housing assistance, etc. They wrestle with the social ghoulishness of the right while fearing the economic program of the left because they feel it would target them to their detriment. I could not get a bead on how or if these men voted. I think there's a good chance they just checked out. But these men knew the words to this song on 80s night. We're all clustered around, age 40, have heard it many times, of course, but they genuinely love it. How could that be if they don't care about, if not identify with, the character? I find myself wondering how they miss the sort of radical messaging. I guess that's just the effects of years of anti-leftist conditioning. But there is some hope there that this song doesn't just touch us podcast-listening, academically inclined leftists, but also some people who you wouldn't expect it to. So I loved that comment, and thank you, Deranged Hermit, and thank you everybody who comments on our Patreon page, because it's a space that really keeps me going on doing this show. Honestly, is knowing that we're I don't know, there's people out there like you guys that are smart and humane and have interesting, dynamic things to say beyond the kind of stupid Twitter shit that depresses me, right? The hot take shit. I don't know. I like the idea of working through the problems together, because nothing is settled for me, and that's how I like to approach all of this stuff. Okay, so thank you, Deranged Hermit. Great comment. I'd like to do this each week too, as a sort of final thing, is recommend a particular book from my bookshelf. I know that I'm one of those dudes that's on Zoom or YouTube or whatever with all the books behind me. And that's not an affectation or performance, at least not consciously. I hope it's not. But those books those are my books. I have a ton of them. And Claudia, my wife, has even more. We live in a kind of library. So I thought, it'd be fun to pull down a book each week that I remember. One that I look at the bookshelf and I'm like, ooh, that's one that I don't even have to open to know what's in there because it's got something special for me. I'd like to share that with you each week too, because all this stuff is sort of, I don't know, part of my inner architecture, and I thought you might be interested. So, this book that I want to share this week is a memoir. Not surprising. I share a lot of memoirs and biographies, but this is a memoir about Kurt Vonnegut, a 20th century writer. You've probably heard of Kurt Vonnegut. If you're listening to this show, I assume you've heard of Kurt Vonnegut. So this book is called "And So It Goes: Kurt Vonnegut, A Life," written by Charles J. Shields. Came out several years ago, right after Vonnegut died. This author was able to actually interview Vonnegut right at the end of his life. It's not really the central piece of the book because he really only got to see him once. But he had his blessing over the years, and I think of it as sort of the official biography of Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut is someone that's special to me, and maybe special to you, or maybe not. But I think of him as a comrade in some ways. I always appreciated his writing, his way of taking really, really surreal, dark takes and sort of sci-fi weird stories, and sort of melding them to a really deep sense of humanity. And all of that, when you read "And So It Goes," the biography, comes from Vonnegut's life experience. It's an intense one. I mean, he grew up kind of privileged, and then his family sort of lost their fortune and fell apart. His mother committed suicide just a couple days before Vonnegut himself was shipped overseas to fight in the Battle of the Bulge. His experience in World War II is obviously sort of a central part of forming his inner architecture. Most famously, Vonnegut was involved and present at the firebombing of Dresden, Germany, by Allied forces, mostly the British. And he was a prisoner of war in Germany when that happened. He was hiding at the bottom of a slaughterhouse and had to crawl up out of it through all the meat that had been cooked by the heat. And what he emerged into was a nightmare world. And that experience of World War II, even before that, I mean, he was captured as a prisoner and then put on a train, and that train full of American and British POWs was then fired upon by the fucking British, who didn't understand that their own people were on the train. And Vonnegut happened to survive and watch 150 people around him just get blown up, essentially. So he's like covered in blood and guts by the time he gets to Germany, and then he's set to work in this slaughterhouse. And then the bombing happens. So I want to read this quick excerpt, because as we're talking about war, and we're talking about World War, and we're talking about sort of how human lives intersect with this massive, unspeakable horror, Vonnegut is one of those that was, for whatever reason, ultimately able to articulate this stuff in a way that translated to literature that became classic in its own way. Slaughterhouse-Five is the book he had been writing for many years. Slaughterhouse-Five comes out in the 60s. That's where he actually wrote a novel about his experience at Dresden, and it became one of, honestly, the most famous writings about the bombing of Dresden. But either way, he'd been writing for a long, long time, many, many things, many novels, many pieces in magazines. Slaughterhouse-Five, in other words, it's like he didn't become a big, popular, best-selling writer until he came to terms with and really articulated what World War II was and what it meant to someone like this. To me, I mean, there are lots of lessons from Vonnegut's life, but the idea that, he was this outcast guy, and this is part of why I identify him with him too, is because he didn't have a lot of friends in real life. He was instead someone who sort of broadcast his particular vision from his room. And this story, I ended up really appreciating who Vonnegut was and feeling for him deeply. This is a tremendous book. But here's an excerpt that captures, this is about the bombing of Dresden, and a little bit of how Vonnegut takes that story and turns it into something. Vonnegut's job was finding the remains of residents smothered in basements by the firestorms from the bombing. Superheated tornadoes had sucked out the oxygen and turned hiding places into tombs. Basements, he said, looked like a streetcar full of people who'd simultaneously had heart failure. Just people sitting there in their chairs, all dead. Teams from the Arbeitskommando passed through a cordon of German soldiers to begin what Vonnegut called a terribly elaborate Easter egg hunt. Some Dresdeners couldn't contain their rage and grief as they watched the bodies of neighbors and family members dragged by ropes around their ankles, disinterred from homes that had become their graves. A German officer grabbed one of the Americans, threw him against a wall, put a pistol to his head, shouting until the guards finally managed to calm him down. In the streets, corpses were stacked high on wooden racks, sprinkled with lime and set afire. To reach flooded basements accessible by narrow stairs, the guards formed the prisoners into relays, sending one captive down at a time. Encouraged by cuffing and guttural abuse, wade in we did, wrote Vonnegut. We did exactly that, for the floor was covered with an unsavory broth from burst water mains and viscera. Down there, the captives fought off hysteria when limbs of corpses snapped off, or yanking a gas mask, pulled off a head. Weeks passed, and the funk everywhere indicated that the bodies burned on pyres represented only a fraction of what still remained below. The captain assembled the Arbeitskommando for new instructions. They were to recover items of identification and valuables only. Once the prisoners had resurfaced with everything they could find, German troops, some of them with experience in the death camps, stepped forward with flamethrowers. The ceremonies associated with respecting the dead had ended. Jets of ignited gasoline converted former sanctuaries for the living into catacombs. By going into cellars day after day, a POW named Michael Pelaia saw what all the other prisoners did too. There were subterranean pantries of pickled asparagus, pickled onions, apple butter, cherries, string beans, beets, carrots, jams, jellies, sausage, pie fillings, berry syrup, groaning shelves of sealed jars that a starving man could steal if he were careful. Pelaia was one of the older prisoners and unable to withstand the deprivations as well as the younger men. While he was in a basement on the last day of March, someone shouted down at him, "Hey, the SS troops are coming. You better get your ass out of there if there's anybody in there." Selecting a jar of pickled string beans, he stashed it under his coat and walked back out into the street. The Arbeitskommando was about to begin the return 4-mile march to Gorbitz, and he was looking forward to sitting on his bunk and eating the beans. The SS officers who spotted him might have passed him by, except he had made himself conspicuous through an earlier fatal choice. From the frozen pile of overcoats inside the gate at Stalag 4B, he had grabbed a heavy one that was different from most. On the back were the letters CCCP, the Russian abbreviation for Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The SS ordered him to stop and unbutton his coat. There was nothing he could do. The contraband was a good-sized jar, and they plucked it out. Later that night, said Vonnegut, Pelaia was court-martialed and ordered to sign a document he didn't understand, admitting he was guilty of looting. The next morning, April 1st, Palm Sunday, guards issued shovels to Kurt Vonnegut and 3 other prisoners and took them to a rise within sight of the camp so the rest of the Arbeitskommando could see the example being set. The 4 men were ordered to dig graves, while Pelaia and a Polish soldier stood nearby. When they had finished, an officer turned Pelaia and the Polish soldier around by their shoulders, stepped back and shouted an order. A firing squad shot the prisoners in the back. The Germans reloaded and shot them again. Vonnegut and the others were ordered to pick up the bodies and place them each in a grave. One of the Americans, knowing Pelaia had been a Catholic like him, placed a rosary in his hands and said a prayer. Refilling the graves took a matter of minutes. Later, when telling his family how impassively the executions were carried out, Vonnegut burst into tears. The sons of bitches. The sons of bitches. He would model a character in Slaughterhouse 5 on Pelaia. Edgar Derby, the 44-year-old English teacher, executed for stealing a teapot. So that's just a little bit of the fucked up shit that Kurt Vonnegut had to deal with in World War II, and he's obviously not alone in that. But just, God, the idea of digging through corpses and being made to dig through corpses by Nazis who are executing the old men who are just trying to feed themselves because they're starving. It's just so much to take. And the kicker at the end of this chapter is Vonnegut talking to other soldiers on the ship on the way back to the United States, and they're all like, basically like, I don't fucking believe in God anymore after what I've seen and done. And Vonnegut, writing later, said that was immensely troubling to him to hear that, and he felt that that losing faith in humanity or God or whatever that means, like giving up, was just a step too far for him, and that's really important. And it's honestly, I think, what leads him to write and leads him to communicate this horror in a way that captures something not to lose. Because reading this stuff you can just, it's very easy, I think, to just give up on humanity when you read it. At the same time, Vonnegut is someone that sort of, I think, remains an example of how not to do that and why that's important. So Charles J. Shields' book, And So It Goes, Kurt Vonnegut, A Life. Highly recommended. Tons of great stuff in there. Still thinking about it. All right, so I think that is enough for this week. I hope you enjoyed our little news rundown, and catch us again next week on News Trap. Thanks so much. See ya.